The extraordinary story of Nancy Wake begins not on a battlefield, but in the sophisticated world of pre-war European high society. Born in New Zealand and later relocating to Australia, Wake eventually found her way to France, working as a freelance journalist. Her life changed dramatically when she married Henri Fiacre, a wealthy French industrialist, in 1939, settling into a life of luxury and comfort in Marseille. She was known for her charm, wit, and fashionable style, a far cry from the ruthless agent and military commander she would soon become. However, beneath the elegant exterior lay an absolute refusal to tolerate injustice, a trait ignited years earlier when she personally witnessed the brutal, unprovoked treatment of Jewish people by German thugs while she was reporting in Vienna. When France fell to the German invasion in the summer of 1940, Nancy Wake did not hesitate. Despite her privileged position in unoccupied, or Vichy, France, which was initially less rigorously policed by the Germans, she immediately committed herself to the struggle against the occupation. She used her substantial wealth, her fluency in French, and her freedom of movement to help the desperate situation. Her large, luxurious apartment in Marseille quickly became an essential safe house, a hidden communication hub, and a temporary refuge for Allied soldiers and airmen who had been trapped behind enemy lines following the sudden collapse of the French military. This brave act marked her total rejection of the new fascist reality and the immediate, spontaneous start of her personal secret war. Wake's incredible effectiveness rapidly drew her into one of the most vital operations in southern France, the Allied escape lines. She became a key facilitator for the Pat O'Leary escape network, which specialized in guiding Allied military personnel, shot-down airmen, and Jewish refugees across the country and over the perilous Pyrenees Mountains into neutral Spain. Wake excelled in this dangerous work, utilizing her innate charisma to procure false papers, expertly bribe corrupt officials, and secretly smuggle essential funds and supplies to those in need. Her unique ability to slip through checkpoints and consistently evade surveillance by exploiting her appearance earned her several aliases, but the German Gestapo soon recognized her efficiency. They publicly bestowed upon her a notorious moniker that reflected her absolute elusiveness, the White Mouse. The name the White Mouse quickly became a legend among the Allies, and a source of immense frustration for the Gestapo. Her successful activities escalated the risk dramatically, and by 1943, the German secret police were closing in on her organization. They knew her work was crippling their attempts to secure the region and control the vital flow of intelligence and personnel. Nancy Wake was now officially their most wanted person in all of France, with a staggering 5 million franc bounty placed directly on her head. The situation became too dangerous to manage for Marseille, forcing her to make the agonizing decision to flee her home, her husband Henri Fiacre, and her underground networks, leaving Vichy France for Spain in a desperate attempt to reach Britain and continue the fight with proper military backing. The massive 5 million franc bounty placed on Nancy Wake's head by the Gestapo finally forced her to make the agonizing decision to flee France in 1943. Her escape was far from a smooth journey. After surviving several terrifying close calls with German patrols, she began a harrowing trek across the treacherous Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. She crossed the forbidding, snow-covered peaks, suffering greatly from exposure and exhaustion, a profound physical ordeal that was matched only by the immense psychological pain of leaving her beloved husband, Henri Fiacre, behind in Marseille. She knew that by staying, she risked compromising the entire escape network, but her departure meant leaving him tragically vulnerable to the Gestapo's inevitable and brutal retribution. After successfully making her way through Spain via the established underground lines, she finally reached the relative safety of Britain. Once in London, her reputation and her deep, practical knowledge of the French underground networks and territory preceded her. She was immediately recognized as an invaluable asset and was quickly recruited by the Special Operations Executive, or SOE, an elite secret organization established by Winston Churchill with the singular, audacious aim of setting occupied Europe ablaze through sabotage and subversion. The Special Operations Executive specialized in deploying secret agents behind enemy lines, and Nancy Wake was precisely the type of fiercely capable, tough, and discreet operative they desperately needed. Her fluent French, her intimate understanding of enemy security procedures in the Vichy region, and her pre-existing network of contacts made her an unparalleled candidate for a high-risk return mission. Her training was relentless and comprehensive, designed specifically to transform the former journalist and socialite into a deadly, self-sufficient field agent. She trained rigorously in all facets of secret warfare, mastering parachute jumping, silent unarmed combat and killing techniques, the safe use of various explosives, and the rapid encryption and decryption of secret codes for secure communication. Despite being older than many of her fellow recruits, Nancy Wake excelled, demonstrating astonishing physical toughness and an iron will that immediately impressed her male instructors. It was during this intense training that her famous, fiercely determined personality solidified. She was given the official codename Helene for her new mission, but she remained internally driven by the notorious reputation she had earned in Marseille as the White Mouse. In early 1944, having flawlessly completed her intensive training, Nancy Wake was finally ready to be parachuted back into the heart of occupied France. Her objective was now far more critical than running an escape line. She was tasked with a high-level command role, organizing and arming a large section of the Maquis, the main force of the French resistance, in the rugged Auvergne region. She would be personally responsible for receiving massive aerial drops of weapons and explosives, coordinating thousands of resistance fighters, and preparing the region for the critical role it would play in sabotaging German movements ahead of the impending Allied invasion. This was the ultimate, most dangerous challenge for the White Mouse, risking everything to return to the enemy who had sworn to capture her dead or alive. In the early hours of March 1, 1944, Nancy Wake executed her ultimate leap of faith. Having received her intensive, specialized training from the Special Operations Executive in Britain, she parachuted back into the heart of occupied France, landing near the isolated and rugged Auvergne region. Her mission was surgically clear. She was to serve as the essential communications and supply link, as well as the cipher expert, for one of the largest and most vital French resistance groups in the country, the Maquis commanded by Captain Henri Tardivet. She carried vital operational funds, cash, and her specialized knowledge, instantly transforming her status from an escape line helper into a critical military field officer. The jump itself was harrowing, landing her in a dark, unfamiliar terrain, but the immediate satisfaction of being back on French soil and fighting the German occupiers was a driving, palpable force. Her first days were immediately dedicated to establishing a stable, working relationship with the local resistance fighters. She quickly found the Maquis in the Auvergne region to be extremely motivated and fearless, composed of idealistic young men, former soldiers, and passionate patriots. However, they were desperately undersupplied, often fragmented into small, isolated units, and severely lacking in military cohesion and training. Nancy Wake's immediate, critical task was to organize and centralize their operations. She, along with her assigned radio operator, Dennis Rake, worked relentlessly to set up secure communication with London. This vital, unbroken link allowed her to begin coordinating the precise location and timing for the massive aerial drops of weapons, ammunition, and medical supplies, the material desperately needed to transform a collection of brave partisans into an effective, uniformed fighting force. Nancy Wake quickly established her absolute command presence and earned the fierce loyalty of the rough, predominantly male fighters. Her authority was not based on rank alone, but on sheer force of will, her rigorous military training, and her immediate, absolute willingness to perform any task, no matter how dangerous or physically demanding. On one famous occasion, she demonstrated her lethal competence by single-handedly killing a German sentry during a sudden roadblock, a feat that shocked the men and immediately solidified her reputation for courage under fire. Her natural discipline often clashed with the highly independent spirit of the local Maquis commanders, but they quickly learned that following her strict orders regarding communication security, the proper storage of weapons, and coordination was fundamentally essential for their long-term survival and for the success of their larger mission to sabotage the German war machine. The stakes were constantly rising, reflecting her high profile. The Gestapo knew a high-value agent had landed in the area, and the German regular army, the Wehrmacht, began stepping up aggressive anti-partisan operations, sweeping through the forests and mountains in search of the resistance command structure. Nancy Wake, moving through the harsh landscape on foot or by bicycle, was constantly on the move, establishing new hidden spots for her radio operator and herself, maintaining unbroken communication while expertly evading German patrols. She had now firmly established herself as the crucial, irreplaceable link between the isolated and highly vulnerable resistance fighters and the massive Allied war machine waiting across the English Channel, fulfilling the ultimate promise she had made to return and lead the fight. The immense effort Nancy Wake exerted to organize the French resistance paid off almost immediately, with the arrival of substantial air support from the Special Operations Executive in Britain. Her secure communication line with London allowed her to accurately coordinate massive parachute drops. These drops were highly dangerous operations conducted on remote, makeshift fields at night, requiring meticulous organization to quickly gather and hide tons of essential supplies, including Bren guns, light explosives, and ammunition. Nancy Wake was constantly present during these drops, personally overseeing the security and rapid distribution, ensuring every single gun reached its intended recipient among the Maquis fighters. Her efficiency in managing this complex logistics operation was unparalleled, quickly transforming the poorly equipped resistance groups into a formidable, armed, and cohesive fighting force. With the necessary supplies secured, the forces under Nancy Wake's strategic command grew dramatically. Her organizational skills and charismatic authority unified disparate regional groups, putting her in effective charge of approximately 7,000 resistance fighters spread across a vital area of the Auvergne region. Her leadership style was unique. She was capable of immense charm, but delivered her military orders with the unyielding authority of a seasoned field officer. Her fighters, predominantly male and hardened by years of underground life, gave her absolute loyalty and fierce respect. She was known to lead directly from the front lines, demonstrating practical military competence that transcended any traditional views of a woman's role in the highly dangerous world of combat. The focus of the Maquis operations now shifted from simple preparation to active, large-scale sabotage, designed specifically to paralyze German infrastructure in anticipation of the Allied invasion. Under Nancy Wake's strategic command, resistance units launched coordinated attacks on German supply columns, military convoys, bridges, and, most critically, railway lines and communication centers. The unified goal was to render the Auvergne region a logistical nightmare for the Wehrmacht, effectively preventing German armored reserves from moving quickly to the beaches of Normandy once the invasion began. The constant, relentless sabotage drew a violent and immediate response from the German forces, leading to frequent and brutal skirmishes between the Maquis and the heavily armed patrols of the Gestapo and the Wehrmacht. Nancy Wake's personal bravery became the stuff of legend within the resistance. In one critical instance, when her radio operator's cipher codes were suddenly lost during a difficult skirmish, threatening to cut off her vital link to London, she immediately volunteered for the impossible task. She mounted her bicycle and rode for over 500 kilometers, 310 miles, round trip across heavily occupied France, a journey through multiple controlled areas, to retrieve new codes from another special operations executive agent. She completed this arduous and terrifying journey in just 72 hours, immediately returning to re-establish the critical communication link just in time for a major weapons drop. Such feats of courage and astonishing endurance were why the Gestapo were so desperate to find the White Mouse, viewing her not just as a spy, but as the single, charismatic nerve center of the entire regional resistance operation. As the spring of 1944 gave way to early summer, the French resistance forces under Nancy Wake's command entered their most critical phase. The coded signals from the Special Operations Executive in Britain were received, indicating that the long-awaited Allied invasion, D-Day, was now absolutely imminent. The command for the Maquis was clear: launch a massive, coordinated sabotage blitz to disrupt German movements across the Auvergne region. Nancy Wake personally directed attacks aimed at crippling the Wehrmacht's ability to rush armored reinforcements to the Normandy beaches. The targets were strategic and varied: railway lines, vital communication trunks, and essential road bridges. The resulting damage was immense, strategically slowing down German troop and tank movements by several critical days, buying crucial time for the landing forces. The nature of the conflict in the Auvergne escalated dramatically from covert sabotage to direct, organized guerrilla warfare. The Maquis groups were no longer just blowing up tracks. They were engaging in full-scale skirmishes and firefights with Wehrmacht and Gestapo patrols. Nancy Wake's leadership was instrumental in these engagements, demonstrating her highly effective military skill in planning complex ambushes and directing troop maneuvers. She successfully used the dense forests and rugged terrain of the Auvergne to her advantage, allowing her forces to inflict heavy casualties on the German forces while suffering comparatively minimal losses themselves. Her constant presence on the ground during these intense firefights solidified her command authority, and her fighters noted her absolute, terrifying composure under enemy fire. Her personal heroism was the stuff of legend among her troops, illustrating why the Gestapo feared the White Mouse so intensely. In one pivotal moment, during a forward reconnaissance patrol, the Maquis unexpectedly discovered a surprise German sentry post that threatened to compromise an entire operation. A German guard was preparing to raise the alarm when Nancy Wake acted with lightning speed and cold decisiveness. She quickly disposed of the guard with a single, swift, and lethal blow to the neck using a close-quarters weapon or her hand, eliminating the threat instantly and silently. Her actions were not only physically courageous, but were born of a cold, calculated resolve necessary for command. When later asked about the incident, she famously dismissed it, saying she did not carry a cosmetic compact or perfume. She carried weapons and explosives. The German response to the persistent, organized attacks in the Auvergne was predictably brutal and swift. The Wehrmacht launched massive anti-partisan sweeps, utilizing thousands of dedicated troops in a desperate attempt to crush the resistance before it could fully aid the Allied invasion. Nancy Wake and her fighters were constantly forced to relocate their command posts, expertly dodging large German formations in the forests. Despite the relentless pressure, the mounting losses, and the ever-present danger of discovery, Nancy Wake maintained total control and command over her 7,000 fighters. Her astonishing success in keeping the network alive and ensuring the sabotage continued was a monumental achievement, tying up thousands of German soldiers desperately needed on the distant Normandy front. Following the successful Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, the mission of the French resistance under Nancy Wake's command shifted dramatically from secret sabotage to open warfare. The Maquis were ordered by the Allied High Command to rise fully, engaging retreating Wehrmacht columns, and preventing German forces from rapidly consolidating their defenses. Nancy Wake was now operating as a full military commander, leading approximately 7,000 fighters in the rugged Auvergne region. Her command posts were now constantly moving targets, and her radio operator, Dennis Rake, was in continuous contact with London, directing massive air support and coordinating ground offensives with the advancing Allied armies. This was the moment the resistance had trained and waited for, transforming their guerrilla war into a genuine regional uprising. The fighting swiftly escalated into large-scale engagements that rivaled conventional battles. Under Nancy Wake's command, the Maquis successfully ambushed major German military convoys and assaulted fortified positions, directly confronting thousands of professional Wehrmacht troops who were desperately attempting to flee south. One notable action involved a sustained battle where thousands of partisans effectively tied down several German divisions near the town of Montluçon, severely disrupting their retreat route and inflicting heavy casualties. Nancy Wake was often personally present at the command center nearest the front, demonstrating incredible tactical acumen in a purely offensive and defensive environment. Her authority and effectiveness in directing these large-scale troop movements were absolutely critical in ensuring the Auvergne region remained a chaotic, insurmountable obstacle to the German high command. The logistical strain of maintaining such a large, armed force in the field was immense and fell almost entirely upon Nancy Wake's organizational skills. She became the central nervous system for supply, organizing the continuous distribution of food, ammunition, and medical aid for her 7,000 fighters, while the entire command structure was constantly under threat of German attack. She used her training from the Special Operations Executive to establish field hospitals and secured supply dumps, ensuring that the Maquis could sustain prolonged open combat. This administrative and command genius, coupled with her legendary tenacity, was instrumental in keeping the entire resistance movement unified and highly operational during the critical period when German forces were fighting their desperate way out of France. The weight of command in open warfare demanded ruthless decisiveness, a burden Nancy Wake accepted without flinching. In one grim, necessary incident, the Maquis captured a suspected female German spy who had successfully infiltrated their ranks and was attempting to compromise their supply drop locations. When the partisan fighters hesitated and expressed reluctance to execute the spy due to the moral gravity, Nancy Wake immediately relieved them of the duty and handled the necessary execution herself. This profound moment illustrated the grim reality of her role: to protect the lives of her thousands of fighters and the integrity of the entire operation. She had to be tougher and more ruthlessly decisive than any man in her command, upholding the cold, hard rules of espionage and war. The summer of 1944 brought the final, decisive moments of the war in France. Following the initial Allied invasion in Normandy, a second major landing, Operation Dragoon, struck the southern coast of France in August. Nancy Wake immediately coordinated her 7,000 Maquis fighters to synchronize their full-scale uprising with the advancing Allied armies. Her objective was singular: to ensure that the German forces in the Auvergne region were completely pinned down and utterly unable to rush armored reinforcements to their threatened positions. Through flawless radio communication with Britain, she directed the Maquis to launch every possible ambush and sabotage mission, creating an insurmountable wall of resistance that effectively trapped and confused the retreating Wehrmacht divisions. The pressure from Nancy Wake's highly effective forces became the final, decisive straw for the German occupation in the region. Faced with a relentless army of partisans in their immediate rear and the rapid advance of the Allied invasion from the south, the German military position became entirely untenable. The Wehrmacht units began a desperate, chaotic withdrawal, harassed and attacked by the Maquis at every single turn. Nancy Wake personally oversaw the tactical maneuvers that led to the swift liberation of significant towns in the Auvergne, often accepting the formal surrender of hundreds of German troops, who had been completely demoralized and exhausted by the continuous, brutal guerrilla warfare orchestrated from the shadows. The massive scale of the German defeat in the region was a direct, undeniable testament to Nancy Wake's organizational and military genius. Her Maquis forces, now numbering in the thousands and operating openly, effectively transitioned from a hidden resistance to a crucial, visible army, controlling vast stretches of territory and successfully disarming thousands of enemy soldiers. Her critical success led to her formal and celebrated meeting with the approaching Allied command, likely American and Free French forces, who confirmed the immense strategic value of her efforts in pinning down the enemy divisions. She delivered a liberated region into Allied hands, ensuring that the German retreat turned into a catastrophic and complete rout. The end of the intense fighting marked a profound psychological shift for Nancy Wake. She was no longer the white mouse, the fugitive spy constantly dodging the Gestapo, but a decorated and highly visible military commander, lauded by the people of France as the hero who had brought them freedom. She had achieved the impossible. She had returned to the enemy who had sworn to execute her and had orchestrated their overwhelming defeat. However, in the joyous chaos of liberation, the personal price of her mission, the tragic fate of the one person she held most dear, remained a devastating shadow lingering beneath the light of victory. In the joyous chaos following the liberation of France in late 1944, Nancy Wake immediately left the Auvergne region and rushed back to her home in Marseille. The overwhelming success of her mission and the freedom she had helped secure were tempered by one single, agonizing uncertainty: the fate of her beloved husband, Henri Fiacre, whom she had desperately left behind 2 years earlier to protect her network. Her worst fears were tragically confirmed upon her arrival. The Gestapo, furious and humiliated by their inability to capture their elusive target, the white mouse, had turned their brutal attention to the person she loved most. Henri Fiacre had been captured, subjected to prolonged and severe torture, and ultimately executed by the German secret police in August 1943. The execution of Henri Fiacre was the devastating, ultimate price of Nancy Wake's freedom and success. He had been interrogated relentlessly about his wife's location and activities, but he had bravely refused to reveal any information, choosing silence over collaboration. This profound act of ultimate sacrifice allowed Nancy Wake to escape, reach Britain, join the Special Operations Executive, and return to lead the Maquis to victory. Though the war was finally won and France was free, Nancy Wake had lost the man she loved to the direct, personal vengeance of the enemy she had so brilliantly and successfully outwitted. This personal tragedy became a profound, lifelong shadow cast over her well-deserved triumph. Despite the crushing personal loss, Nancy Wake was deservedly recognized and celebrated for her exceptional heroism and direct contributions to the Allied victory. She was awarded the highest honors by multiple Allied nations, officially becoming one of the most decorated servicewomen of the entire war. Among her many accolades, she received the prestigious George Medal from the British government, the Légion d'honneur, and the Croix de Guerre from the French government, and the Medal of Freedom from the United States. Her accomplishments were staggering. She was directly responsible for coordinating the resistance efforts of 7,000 men, leading them in successful sabotage and battle against the German Wehrmacht. The story of Nancy Wake was largely suppressed in post-war France and Australia for decades due to layers of official secrecy and political turbulence, but her fame as the White Mouse could not be contained. Her legend as a courageous, uncompromising military commander, who was the Gestapo's most wanted person in France and yet survived to see the liberation, endures as one of the most unique and inspiring tales of courage from the Second World War. She proved that ingenuity, style, and absolute conviction could be a force far more potent than any army, securing her place as one of the great, unsung heroes who helped save Europe from tyranny.